Come along with us as we take a little detour from our normal format and take the scenic route. Our destination? One of the most impressive and intact mansions of the early 20th century, Spadina House, a Canadian National Historic Site. Set amidst lush gardens, this manor house gives us a glimpse of life as it was lived in the early days of Toronto. From galas to garden parties with a backdrop of war, the Great Depression, and ever-advancing technology, Spadina House displays a lavish collection of original artifacts once owned by the grand estate of the Austin family. We even have a quick visit next door to Canada's famous castle, Casa Loma, the most majestic and impressive chateau built this side of the Atlantic in 1914. Let's go! Well, it's been a while since we hit the road, Walker. It has, but we're not going far today, are we, Harris?
And no, that's right. Today we're going to explore the grand mansions of the barons of the early 20th century. In fact, we have a private tour at Spadina House, built in 1866, where 3 generations of the very wealthy Austin family lived until the 1980s. It was donated to the city of Toronto when the last member of the family parted this life, and remains very much the same now as it was when it was a private residence.
Just imagine Toronto back then, Harris. These houses were the first with telephones and electricity. Cars weren't common, and a horse and buggy would get you about town. I can't wait.
I can't wait either. Let's go. I'm here today with Karen Raikkonen, Museum Program Officer at Spadina Musuem Historic House and Gardens. Thanks so much for our tour today, Karen.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, so where are we starting off here?
Well, we can start in 1818 if you want, and then time travel to the 1920s.
That sounds pretty interesting. I'm up for that, eh, Walker?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
We were very lucky to get this tour with Karen today. She's an expert on this beautiful manor house. Is there a lot of educational programs that you host here as well, Karen?
There are.
Okay.
We used to be quite busy with them pre-pandemic.
Okay.
And then during the pandemic, they had to stop like everybody else. So we're planning on bringing them back in September.
Great. Something to look forward to. Okay, so where are we here?
We, what we call the basement. It was 1818 foundation. So the Baldwin families.
Okay.
This was their country home, so we still have the original kitchen.
Yeah, that's a fireplace and a half.
Yep. And then there was a fire in 1835. So if you look under the plexiglass there, you can see the smudge marks. We still have the original hearth here, just because subsequent generations used it as a furnace. So then 1835, a second building was built here at Spadina. And then in 1866, the Austin family, they purchased the property. They used the foundations for the basement of their house. That's why we still have it. And then they built their own. So James Austin, who had been an immigrant from Ireland, and he's the one that purchased the property. So this is his later in life home. He didn't start wealthy, but he worked his way up. He started a grocery business here, and then he sold out and was able to be one of the founders of the Dominion Bank, which is now the TD Bank.
Right.
And he was also president of Consumer Gas.
Okay, so one of the forefathers of the infrastructure in the city.
Yeah, and very much the, work hard and work your way up. Mm-hmm. So this is his wife Susan. So they had 5 children. Their son Albert inherited the place in 1897-98, and this is his wife Mary. They also had 5 children, so we'll hear their stories as we go through the house.
Okay.
And then Anna Kathleen is the only one who had children of her own. And Anna Kathleen is the last family member to live in the house. So she was here until 1982.
Okay.
Fairly recently then.
Mm-hmm. And she's the one who arranged for the partial donation of the house to come to the city to become a museum. So we love her.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna Kathleen.
She didn't have to do that. She could have got a lot more money and sold to a developer, and there would have been condos here.
Yeah.
So people say, why didn't she leave stuff to her kids? But her kids, at that point, they were grown. They had homes of their own. Everybody was financially okay, so they didn't need another house to take on. So they were fully on board with the.
Oh, that's so wonderful because it's such
as well.
Yeah, it's a jewel. It's a jewel in our city.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, upstairs we go.
So up here, when Anna Kathleen left the house, she also left most of the stuff as well, because her kids didn't need mom's stuff, so we got it. So most of the stuff you threw in the house is their furniture and their art and their pictures and all that sort of stuff.
How they lived.
How they lived, yeah. And anything that normally fades, like carpets and wallpapers and stuff, that is reproduced based on what we know was in the house.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a wealth
Fabulous.
of stuff because same family for 4 generations. It's easy to put stuff in a box and say, well, I'm going to deal with that later.
Yeah.
And then you never do.
Yeah.
But then you have a museum and you get clutter, but then you do get like carpet remnants and wallpaper remnants.
So it can come in handy, all of those things in your
I'm not
storage
saying
room.
people should clutter. If your house is going to become a museum, that would be very, very.
It would be helpful. My house is well on the way.
So in 1915, a magazine called Saturday Night, kind of society magazine, came in and took photographs, so we know also where
Wow.
stuff was placed.
It's like being
Moment in
transported back into that time. Exactly.
Yeah, there was a re-restoration 2010, so it became a museum in 1984. It was open 2010. There was a re-restoration, and one of the decisions was before the re-restoration, a lot of rooms were actually in different time periods.
Okay.
Which is what a house normally looks like. You might redo your dining room and not do a bedroom until later. But they were finding that that's quite a broad range, and for people who already didn't know history a lot, that was just adding to confusion. And then some of our sister sites already focus on the Victorian era. So no museum focused on the 20s and 30s era.
Right.
And we had a lot of information. So it kind of narrowed the focus, and it was
That's
something
good.
other museums weren't.
A great idea.
Weren't doing.
Filling a niche there.
Filling a niche.
Right.
So it was a grand one
Beautiful.
for sure. We have pictures of how the other half lived in the ward, which is one of the worst slums.
Oh, wow.
And
Whereabouts is that?
That's where New City Hall is.
Okay. It was called the Ward, was
The
it?
ward.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is their entrance with the organ.
My goodness,
And
that's
everything.
quite impressive. Walking in there, you would
You don't
feel.
have an organ in your front.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm sorely lacking in my house.
So people would come in the front door. So the door you came in was the servants' entrance back in the day. This is the historic entrance, the grand entrance where people would come in, and you'd be greeted by the wolves at the door.
I was going to ask you if those were originally there.
Yeah, there were originally wolves there.
What's the significance of them, or do we know?
I mean, there's taxidermy through the house. It was decorative. The thinking of the time was, I appreciate nature, therefore I will display dead animals on my wall.
Okay.
Now, why you would choose snarling wolves to greet your guests?
It's an interesting concept,
thing.
yeah.
That's a list of questions we'd like to ask Albert.
Right.
You know, we're just-
They're pretty impressive.
You'd have
Intimidating.
to be a pretty brave person to get past that front door.
I guess, yeah, by invitation only.
And taxidermy was very popular, wasn't it? Was it in the 20s and 30s when it was
It
at
was
its-
popular, yeah, and you like trophy stuff.
Yeah.
You know, just on display. But it's also the kind of thing you can just like flip through the Eaton's catalog at the time, which is like the Amazon of the time, and say, hey, I could use a moose on my wall. Sure, I'll take that.
Okay, all right. Not so much these days, fortunately.
No, but yeah, we do have a portrait here that is not of the time. This is a new thing. So people will come in and meet Mrs. Pipkin here. So this is going back a little bit to the 1870s. So she would have been familiar with the level we saw below when it was in action. So she was a servant here, and she was a laundress in the 1870s.
Okay.
Clearly meant a lot to the family, and one of the family members painted a portrait of her. So we just have a photo. We don't have the
my
original portrait
gosh.
here. The original portrait is in the hands of the descendants of the family member. Her story, we know, she and her husband had left slavery in Maryland. They were freedom seekers and made their way to Toronto. And in Toronto, her husband worked as a laborer, and she worked as a laundress. Maybe for other families, but for here for sure. And there are 4 butterflies in this portrait, which represent the 4 children she had to leave behind, because they were also enslaved, but in different families.
Oh my
And
gosh.
were they reunited with the children? We don't know. We haven't found any paperwork to indicate one way or the other. So this portrait you're looking at here is a modern reimagining of Mrs. Pipkin. So here she's dressed like lady of the house. So we had an exhibit called Dismantle, and throughout the house, it reimagined the house. What if this is Mrs. Pipkin's house? What if there had been fewer barriers? What if there hadn't been slavery? All this sort of thing. So there are portraits through the house. They've all been sold, but this one we get to keep.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
Mrs. Pipkin, and just recognizing her.
Her life and her contribution.
It's
Yeah.
lovely that you've positioned her right in the front entrance as well.
It is. The artist here, his name is Gordon Shadrach, and you can Google him. And he does paint a lot of people of color in historic dress. We've got a series of men in like the red coat outfit. Yeah. And
that would be so interesting.
Reimagining history like that. Yeah. So people would come in the front door, and then they would be directed to this room over here called the reception room. So very formal room. Wouldn't be used all the time. Would be used to receive guests. And Mary used it on Fridays. On Fridays, she would make a point of being at home. So if you wanted to see her, you can find her. More for formal visiting. Say you wanted her to support your charity, something like that.
Right, okay.
If you were very close friends, she would take you to another part of the house.
So like a receiving room of...
A receiving room, yeah. And Mary Austin was basically the decorator of her house. So when James passed away, Albert and Mary moved in. And Mary, she kept some stuff, but she made it her own. She's very much lady of the house.
And it's feminine, like it's a sort of like a deep pink almost. It's red, but it has a pink undertone. It does have a feminine feel.
Yeah. Glow. And the original walls in here were real silk damask.
Oh my gosh.
And they're padded a little bit. So if you're in this room, you don't get a lot of echo.
That's so fascinating. How would you clean silk walls? That would be yes. Yeah, exactly.
You have
I'm not so sure I would be up to that task.
The parties will happen in here.
Okay.
That is Mary's piano over there. It was a wedding gift from her in-laws.
Oh wow.
And the music you hear playing in the background is the outing waltz, which Mary wrote.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, she was a great supporter of arts and culture. Playing the piano was her great love. She was a pianist before she got married in her church. So if you come on a tour and if you know how to play the piano and you ask, we do let people play. Helps the piano to keep in
Oh, you're kidding.
in tune. If you don't know how to play and you're just going to pound on the keys,
yes, please do not.
Please do not. Yeah.
Oh, that's such a neat thing to know. Well, you might have a few more requests now.
Maybe. Depends on
the word will be out.
Depends on the guide.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to be on a guided tour to see Spadina, so it's never a case walk around. So it's always by guided tours. So you'd be with a guide. So the tours are free, but they are guided. Yeah.
It makes sense in a place with so much of value.
There's so much of value,
Yeah.
and it's a big house. So we have the fires. Fine fireplaces would have been used. So these are Baldwin fireplaces here that were repurposed, and then later would have been coal, and then later gas. So these are gasoliers here.
Okay.
So they're still connected to the gas line. So technically they could be turned on, and later electricity. So the house by the 1920s was partial gas, partial electricity. So this family could have had, it's kind of the smart home of the era. So any of the latest technologies they could have afforded.
I love that, the smart home of the time. That's really neat. And he was, I can't remember which Austin, but one of the gentlemen was involved with Consumers Gas, you said?
They both were. So first generation, he was president, and then those titles kind of passed on to his his son, the second generation.
Right. So he had to have some gas being piped into the home.
Yeah, it's good advertising. It's good marketing. Yeah. And in the 20s, there was a real debate. What's better? What's gas or what's electricity? So now, nobody really cares what you choose in your house. It was quite like you had to kind of pick a side.
Oh,
Each
really?
side was saying the other side was not safe.
Of course.
From our perspective, if you look at the technology, you're like, well, neither of you were kind of safe.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, quite a tussle for a while.
Okay.
In the baseboards, I don't think I've quite seen baseboards this tall before.
Early days of Toronto, you had larger trees. Like now they were all cut down and not replaced. You had these huge old growth.
That's right.
So if you go in a really old building in Toronto, you might see very large beams, different places, and those they're lost. The thinking was, well, Canada has lots of trees, so we'll just keep chopping them down. And then they realized, wait.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
A renewable resource, but not a very quickly renewing resource.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when Albert inherited his father's place, he kept the structure as is, but he did add on some rooms. So this is one of the rooms he added on. We call it the Palm Room, PALM.
Beautiful.
And kind of a seamless transition. You look behind, you can see this was an outside wall.
Okay, yeah.
At one point.
Yeah.
And his rooms are a bit brighter and bigger. It's a different style, and they're brighter. So the Palm Room. This could be if there was a party happening in the drawing room. This would be with the orchestra and the musicians.
Okay.
Would set up. This could be another place to have visitors over for coffee or tea. If there was a garden party, of which there were many, the doors would open up
Onto the beautiful garden.
Onto the gardens. Yeah, and we have 2 full-time gardeners here, so they're the ones that take care of the gardens, but the 6 acres, but also they take care of all these plants here. And one of our head gardeners, she's been the head gardener since it became a museum.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, so we're never going to let her retire.
No, since I guess the 80s, the 1980s. Wow, that's amazing. So she must really know this property so inside and out.
Knowledge like no other.
Wow.
Yeah,
irreplaceable.
You can't replace that.
Yeah,
exactly. So a room like this, also in the 20s, it's kind of a testament to Albert's wealth, because a lot of people would have a garden, but they'd be gardening vegetables for food and stuff. This is not that. You see, they're tropical plants that aren't naturally grown. We've got little palm trees and everything. So Albert would send away for seeds, and he was interested in botany. And only a wealthy man would have had enough leisure time for something like that.
Yeah.
Only a wealthy man would even consider heating what is basically a glass room in the Canadian winter to keep your pretty flowers alive. But I don't like giving Albert all the credit. I don't, because he did have a garden. He had a garden. And you see on the floor there's a door.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask about that.
Yeah. So that it's sealed now, but it would open up, and there was a ladder, and it would go down to the basement where we just were. So the gardener can get his tools and whatever.
Easy
and come
access.
Up this way. Yeah.
Without having to go through the house.
Without having
through
to
the main
go through the house and
house.
track mud, or there's anything going on.
That's clever.
So this family was very good to their servants, but there is still that element of upstairs, downstairs.
Absolutely.
If there's a party or something, and the gardener was here, it can be
hidden away.
Discreet.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yes, that's the word for it, discreet.
You
Wow.
might want to avoid your boss too.
Exactly, it goes both ways.
Definitely works both ways. Yeah, for sure.
What a stunning room.
And the view would have been quite different. So when the Baldwins were here in 1818, it was a clear view to the lake. That was the that was the point. Spadina Road was basically a private driveway all the way down. Now you can't see anything because the trees are through. But even in the winter, if you come, you'll see the skyline. So there's a little sliver of water if you know where to.
Yeah, it's pretty populated down there now along the lakefront.
Yeah, the shoreline lakefront is completely different. If you look at old maps, it's quite a change.
Wow, and up here on the hill too, it would have been spectacular.
It would have been.
Hey, where are we now?
So now we're in what the family called the library. And it's still a bit fancy compared to what fashionable today, but it's still a little toned down so you don't see anything fancy on the ceiling. So it was meant more of a family room, not necessarily one that was meant to impress. However, if anybody did come in here, they would be impressed with the latest in technology, with the 1927 Crosley radio. Albert paid $500 for it. We did some calculations. That would be about $8,000.
Wow.
Today.
And it really wasn't all that long ago.
It wasn't all that long ago, but it was really
the top
cool
of technology then.
I mean, you could be in the comfort of your own home and hear music and news broadcasts and just relax. But people were very worried still. They said, what's going to happen with society? Because people are just focused on their technology.
Yeah.
They're not talking
then.
about yeah.
Wow.
Same arguments we get for the phone.
Oh, absolutely.
And previous generations, they were lamenting the use of newspapers, saying, people aren't going to read novels anymore. They're just going to get used to these short newspaper blurbs, and people are just going to become stupid.
So there's
always
a worry.
Things change. It's humans are still humans.
Yes,
nothing without
so
a 4-minute read at the top to tell you how much time to budget.
Exactly.
Here's a pretty beautiful place to visit at Christmas.
Yeah, we decorate for the holidays the way that Esme. So Esme is one of the granddaughters. And at one point, she gave an interview to a newspaper, and she described how it was and where the greenery was and how the table was set out. So the way we kind of put the furniture where we know it was, we decorate it as per Esme's memory. So it's not us saying, I think that looks nice there. It's really, and we talk about how the family, and we talk about what toys would children play with in the 1920s, experience of the grandchildren, and experiences of, the have and have nots as well. And then now with newcomers coming in, when people visit, we open the discussion to celebrations that other people have at the same time of year.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's so interesting. I have been here with my own kids when they were small at Christmas, and it was a real education for them.
Yeah.
Despite being such a huge home, it has a very warm and comfortable
That's what
feeling.
I like about it. Yeah. It's very much a family home, and there's stories behind it. So it's not just, we have nice furniture, although people want to talk about the furniture, but it's who sat in the chair and who lived here. And the other thing too is you can think of this rich family on the hill, but they had their share of ups and downs too.
As well.
And my favorite photograph, if people come on my tour, I always point out that photograph. It's my favorite. So that's the kids when they're small. So they're kind of toddler to, I guess the oldest might be like 10 or 12.
Okay.
There, and that's how the kids were when they moved into the house. So,
Okay.
so what happened to all of them? So this girl in the middle is Anna Kathleen. The one we were saying was the last family member to live in the house. And she had 3 kids. Her older sister, Adele. Adele did get married in her 40s, which was late for the time, but still the era where you had to get your dad's permission before you got married. So after Albert passed, she married him. Happy marriage, but they didn't have children. The little one there, Margaret Constance, and she's over here. So Margaret Constance, we don't know a lot about her. She's a bit of a mystery. We don't have diaries or anything. It seems she signed up to be a Red Cross nursing assistant in the war.
Okay.
We don't have records of how much she actually did, but when she came back, she must have. The family said she was never quite the same.
Oh, really?
The same again.
Okay.
She never married, which was the fate of a lot of women. A lot of women, especially somebody like Margaret Constance, you're supposed to get married, grow up, and have children. But after the war, so many men didn't come home, and so many men came home in bad shape. So just mathematically, there weren't enough guys to go around.
Yeah.
So Margaret Constance, she was with a wealthy family, so she was able to live here and be supported. It would have been a different story for her if she didn't have that financial support. So this is Percy, and Percy, he did serve in the Great War as a gunner, came back diagnosed with shell shock, PTSD. So many guys did. The doctors had no idea what to do with this. So Percy never got the care he really could have benefited from. So he lived in the country near Barrie for a time and moved back here after Albert passed away. But he was never able to marry or take over the family business. And when he was here, he really liked this room, and he liked lying on the sofa over here and listening to the radio. Family stories, and people remember him say he was just such a really nice guy, but that he did have tremors and stuff, so he did have show effects of his trauma. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the other brother here, Bertie, I'll talk about him in another room. You see pictures of Bertie everywhere. I'll tell you why.
Okay. Oh my goodness.
So the billiard room, this is kind of the most masculine feeling room, I guess Albert's man cave.
Yeah, exactly.
He does, so he could entertain his business associates here. Yeah, and I said Mary's the decorator of her house, but over here you've got like dogs playing poker and stuff, which is not Mary's style. So I suspect Mary said, okay, Albert, here's one room where you can put your...
You can put what you want on the wall.
You can put what you want on the wall in this room. And over there we've got the invalid chair. When Albert got... I'm going to go over closer, take a look.
Yeah.
So when Albert got older, he had some health issues. He would work from home. The secretary would come and work with him. So he ordered this chair, and it could be custom made. So you would tell the customer what you want on it. So it would recline. You can raise your feet. It's got wheels on it, so you can move it around. You've got your pillow. The table opens.
Looks very comfortable.
Yeah, the armrest opens and closes to make it easier to get in and out. Yeah, I think this is totally sell today. Work from home.
I think so. It's like a little lap desk. You can put your iPad on it, right? Your laptop. Very functional.
So we've got some golf trophies here.
Right.
So the family enjoyed golf. So next door where Casa Loma is now, that used to be part of the Austin estate. It was much larger.
Right.
And the family had a private golf course.
Oh. That's nice to have in your backyard.
Right there.
Yeah.
And Albert also founded the Lambton Golf Course in the West End, which is still in existence.
Yeah.
Jane and something.
Right.
So, Albert he decided to sell off some plots of land, not because he needed money, but he saw real estate opportunities. So Toronto kind of grew east-west in the early days, and now it started to grow north. So he had a few plots for sale next door. Henry Pellatt came along and bought all of them and built Casa Loma. So Albert wasn't really thrilled with that.
No.
So Albert and Bertie actually participated in the Olympics in
1904,
06 or something. But it was during the days where you didn't really have to try out for the Olympics. You kind of like sign up.
Just put your name in the hat.
Yeah. And they came like last or something.
Okay.
So you get your
participation badge.
Yeah.
Still, and you can say that you competed in the Olympics. That's pretty remarkable. So you said he did not like Henry Pellatt's project next door.
No, I mean, he knew people would build houses, but he didn't expect quite that. And then Casa Loma wasn't lived in for very long before Henry lost everything. So then the question of what do you do with such a building? Yeah. So this family, they were on really good terms with the Edens next door. Henry Pellatt, I guess, frenemies.
Off and on. Yeah.
Yeah,
I can
so-
understand that when you have a construction project of that size going
Construction
on.
project, yeah, and Albert was head of the gas company, Henry was head of the electric company.
Oh, yes.
Again.
Albert head of what is now the TD Bank, and Henry was head of the home bank, which crashed.
And there went his fortunes.
Yeah, well, Henry Pellatt, he spent a lot of money he didn't actually have in the first place.
Okay.
Some interesting shell games. So if you read about his business dealings, they weren't illegal at the time, but they make you go,
Yeah. A little in the gray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when he had to, bank said, well, we need you to pay back your loans. He wasn't able to, so the bank crashed. So who really got hurt was like the little
investors. Yeah.
So I mean, retired people who lost their life savings. One of the school boards lost all their money to build new buildings.
Wow.
There was a youth group who was trying to get youth off the street, away from a life of crime. They lost everything, and one of the boys said, well, what's the point of working hard in life if the big guys are just gonna
Pull the rug out from under you.
from under us. So the silver lining is there were laws put in place after that to prevent that sort of thing from happening. We haven't had a bank failure in Canada since. So
Well, that's pretty
I guess
impressive.
Sort of, thank you,
Okay.
Henry.
Yes,
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of thank
Sort
you,
of thank
Henry.
you, yeah.
And Casa Loma is quite a spectacular building in and of itself.
So now we're stepping into the kitchen area.
Okay.
So the butler's pantry over there.
Oh, lovely.
You know, things could be locked up, or servants could sit if they had a minute. Scullery here for dishwashing and dish storage, and just
Okay.
overall getting.
Look at how low that sink is.
So that might be a Victorian sink. In the Victorian era, a lot of your kitchen servants would be maybe teenage girls. So it's actually,
Right.
yeah. And then there were no real standards. Now we put a sink or a doorknob or a railway, something. There's just standards. But back then, like, depend on
Who was using the
who
space?
built your stuff. Yeah. So kitchen, big space, but very simple, very plain. It's not decorative at all because this is not the place where you're entertained. So the way we're using our houses now is very different. And if you can head right to the back, you'll see our really large ice box.
Okay. Oh, yes, I remember this from the last time. Okay, this I found so fascinating, the ice box.
Yeah. And it's huge.
It's a full
they
room.
didn't go electric till later, but I mean, if nobody's going to see your kitchen, nobody cares what kind of fridge you have. Mm-hmm. So yeah, ice goes on the top, cold air goes down.
And would they get the ice from Lake Ontario? Like sledded? How would they get
There
ice?
were a lot of ice companies up near Lake Simcoe.
Oh, okay.
There was a company in Toronto at the foot of Grenadier Pond.
Oh, okay.
So it's insane to think about. So pictures behind you showing how thick the ice was. You've got ice thick enough to hold the weight of horses and ice blocks.
Wow.
And the workers, and now it doesn't freeze. So
Where would you get the ice these days?
where would you get the ice these days?
And would they transport it in sawdust? How do they keep it intact?
They would. So there's an image there of industrial storage.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so you cover it in tarp and sawdust, and it keeps
And it keeps
insulates
it.
itself cold. And out the back here, you can see the orchards out there, the apple orchards. The building that's peeking through there is the garage. The top part that you see is where the chauffeur had his apartment.
His
with
quarters?
Family. Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a building you can't see through the trees right now, but later you're walking around, it's like a blue building, and that's where the gardener had part of it for his premises.
Right.
And there were stables there.
Did all the staff live on site, or some did and some did not?
Well, in the 20s, there was a cook and two maids who lived in the house.
Right.
And we'll see where they were, and the chauffeur and the gardener. There were other people who would come in as needed.
Right.
You see those planter boxes out there. So that's a fairly new initiative here. So that's a group named Aki Waduka Jivan, called the Ontario Earth Helpers, and they're an Indigenous community. And they asked if they could build those. So they're growing produce as per First Nations traditions, and it's an opportunity to provide employment for Indigenous youth.
Oh, that's
And
fascinating.
they're using the produce to distribute to people in their communities, so kind of bringing it back, which is kind of a full circle, because the word Spadina is a First Nations word meaning rise of land.
Rise of land, because we're on the hill.
Top of the hill.
We're at the rise of the land. What an amazing initiative.
Yeah.
When did that start?
That's like a couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple
Okay, well,
years. So
definitely.
It's fairly new.
Okay, I love that. I love that. Well, we'll have to check that out when we're outdoors. And what's this receipt here? Oh, like a grocery bill. Still expensive, even back then. Some things are so the same, have remained the same over the decades, and some things are so very different, like having an entire room for your refrigerator, which I don't think I could accommodate in my house. I'm impressed by the historical paint, the paint colors. How do you deal with bangs and in the walls? And are you color matching and things like that?
When we did the restoration, so even if you there's yellow and blue there, which seems like, why wouldn't you just use the same color? But when they did the restoration, they did go through the layers of paint, and experts have ways to do that to figure out what layer is what year with paint and wallpaper. So with nicks and stuff, so we don't let people in here with strollers.
So you try and minimize those kinds of issues.
We try and minimize stuff like that. If anything does really fall apart or something, just because of the age, then we call either maintenance or conservation, depending on
what the issue is.
Yeah.
It's interesting, these homes of this ilk and era have these lifting windows above doors it's like a ventilation system, I would imagine, is it?
It's like a ventilation system, so you can get air through, and especially on top of something like bedrooms, you can still have privacy and close your door but still have ventilation. And our telephone booth.
Oh, telephone booth.
Goodness.
Big
wow.
To the city, small one, direct line to the chauffeur's cottage.
That's amazing. So you wouldn't have to leave the house in the depths of winter to get your car pulled around front.
So dining room. After Albert passed, she put electricity. So married to the gas guy and put electricity after he passed.
She was waiting for her moment.
Maybe waiting for her moment. Yeah. So the family would use this for entertaining, but they would also use it for their private meals as well.
Okay.
There's a small table over there. Children would sit at the children's table. You didn't sit with the adults until you were old enough, and you can prove that you could behave properly.
That's the training table. I know a few adults who belong at the children's table.
There was an ongoing joke about adults getting demoted as well.
Yeah, and the portraits here. This one, Birdie. So I said we'll talk about him later.
Right, Birdie.
So Birdie's everywhere, but he's the only of the 5 kids who has pride of place in this room. It's for a sad reason, because he passed away so young. He was only 24.
Oh.
And he passed away of tuberculosis. So saying rich family, lots of money, but he had tuberculosis. There was no medicine, no cure at the time.
Yeah.
But he was the golden boy. He was the one being trained up, and it was assumed he would take over all the
everything,
and didn't come to pass. So tragic.
What a loss for the family.
It's a huge loss for the family.
And TB was a scourge. Because of what you say, there wasn't any treatment, and it was...
There wasn't any treatment. It was like a pandemic, for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
They were just starting to understand how it was spread, but the family kept it hush-hush because there was a stigma. People thought, well, only poor people get tuberculosis, which is not true, but that was the stigma. So we kept it. And plus, you don't want to announce to the world, hey, we have 3 unmarried daughters, we want to marry off, but we have somebody with a contagious illness.
Exactly.
In the house.
Yeah.
So they built the 3rd floor with him in mind, and we'll see that, basically to make like an isolation space for him. While that was being done, he went to Egypt for drier air.
Okay.
But he got sick in Egypt, couldn't fight it off, and passed away there. So.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
What a shame. Yeah, nobody escapes that kind of tragedy, really, in this life, do they?
So where is he buried?
The family are buried in, I think, James, or in the necropolis.
Okay. Yeah, over in Cabbagetown area.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I think, the oldest cemetery in Toronto.
Yeah, because the Baldwins actually had a little private cemetery on the property, and then the Austins used it a bit, but then with all the development here, they had to move. So we'll head up the down staircase. See a couple rooms up here.
I'm impressed by the light in the house, even though the furnishings and wall coverings are darker because of the time. It's still a very bright home.
I'm so glad you say that. A lot of people come and they think it's so dark. I don't think so. I would agree with you. I think I've worked in darker museums. I think so many people are used to TV screens and their phones and everything that natural light seems kind of dim.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So we are at the top of the stairs.
Okay.
And they call this the blue room. This would be the room where Mary would take you if you were a very close friend or member.
Okay.
Not many people made it up to the 2nd floor. This is a very intimate space. It still looks grand because you can see it from down there. So you still want to impress. But very few people were up here. And I took a descendant through, and she remembers coming here when Anna Kathleen was still here.
Oh, wow.
And she had never seen the 2nd floor.
Oh, you're kidding.
She says, what's up here?
And she was related to the family.
Yeah.
Wow. So it is a privileged place,
It is
indeed.
a privileged place, and then to be very, very private. And Mary would, she was a great supporter of arts and culture, like I said, and she supported up and coming artists, and especially women artists. At the time.
Oh, interesting.
At the time, girls were taught to paint because you were a girl, so anyone who wanted to make a go of it wasn't taken as seriously. So Mary would hang art by men and women side by side, which doesn't sound radical to us, but she was making the point you should just look at the skill of the artist.
And not the gender of the artists themselves.
There are 3 doors down the hall, which when the kids were small, one room's for the girls, one for the boys, and one for the nannies.
Okay.
Even though the kids were there, but the kids spent a lot of time in boarding school in this family. So when I say any of the kids lived here full time, it was more when they were adults. So this house, as comfortable as it is, there's no kid feel, like there's no playroom, there's no nursery. So this is my favorite part of the house. They called it Mary's cozy corner.
Oh, I love it.
So a little space for her to, just kind of relax and get away from it all. It's by 2 windows.
It's beautiful.
Even on cloudy days, you get enough light
to read.
for reading. Yeah, so.
And she would have lit a little fire here, perhaps.
Yeah.
Been really cozy and very private too, like a little snug.
Yeah, and the main bedroom.
Okay.
So which was Albert and Mary's room.
Again, very feminine. Like there really is a feminine feeling with the rose wallpaper.
Yeah, and it's very much, it would have been her domain, the house, and then Albert would have been expected to be, the businessman. And
right.
Very much those traditional spheres. And then the ensuite bathroom. So some of the other rooms also had ensuites as well. So this is how the other half lived. So in Toronto at this time, if you're wealthy, you would have a bathroom like this. If you were back in the ward, you might be having outdoor privies at this point. But at this time, there was a great push for better conditions in Toronto. And Dr. Charles Hastings was the head medical doctor at the time. He unfortunately lost his little girl to bovine tuberculosis drinking bad milk, and he made it his mission to make sure that he could prevent that from happening again if he could help it. So to make it in people's faces, he hired a photographer named Arthur Goss, Goss, and you can Google his works, they're still quite poignant. And Arthur Goss went into the slums and took photographs and printed them in the newspaper, which is the social media of the time. And that got people's attention because you're opening your newspaper in the morning and you see images of children with no shoes, or groups of immigrants, like you see like 20 men to one room. So that got people's attention and said, okay, politicians, you need to make change. You need to do something about this. So we'll make our way upstairs. What we've seen so far, like I said, the furniture and stuff is theirs. Things like carpet and wallpaper are reproduced based on what was here. So what you're going to see upstairs on the 3rd floor, it was just preserved.
Oh, wow. This is really cool.
This is 100-year-old wallpaper. And it's faded, but it's in pretty good
condition. Yeah. And it's bright up here because you have this beautiful skylight.
And the skylight, for fresh air and sunlight. So that was part of thinking about Bertie and his tuberculosis. So recommending like fresh air and sunlight.
Okay.
And this side here was for nurses to take care of Bertie when that wasn't necessary. Plan B servants were moved up here. Okay. So the cook and 2 maids up here. They each had their own room, which is an unprecedented level of privacy. And they had a couple sitting rooms. So they worked about 60 hours a week, so they didn't have much time to sit. But you wanted to offer those perks if you could, because it's hard to get servants, because if you're living in a house like this, you're working for nice people, but your time is not your own. Yeah. If Mary's having a party till 1 a.m, you're working until you're on call. And if, like we said, if you did want to get married and the market was tight, like we were saying, you can't have gentlemen callers here. A lot of women found it more attractive to work in factories, which doesn't sound very glamorous, but the advantage was at the end of your shift, your time was your own. Yes. But then you have to go and find
accommodation and pay for it.
Yeah. So I mean, there's pros and cons to either. Right. To either side. This side was good to their family because when the cook, Mrs. Wallace, got sick for a while, they let her stay here and kept paying her wages, and they hired a replacement until she got better. Okay. Legally, they didn't have to do that. Legally, they could have said, well, you can't work, sorry, bye.
Yeah. And probably that happened more often than not. It happened
more often than not. Yeah. The chauffeur, they gave him a pension.
Okay.
They didn't have to do that.
So they were better than most employers.
Yeah. So this was meant to be Bertie's sitting room, air, sunlight, and everything. If you weren't as wealthy, a lot of people tried to make do with tents in the backyard. The only help really was air and sunshine. Okay. If you were poor and lived in cramped conditions, well, you probably didn't even have
The ability to do that.
Yeah, but then you still had, for the flu and tuberculosis, and we had the Spanish flu, similar to the pandemic. The same kind of, cover your nose, cover your mouth, wear a mask. Some people were pro this, and some people were anti-maskers, and then people not wearing a mask properly. The big thing was don't spit in the street.
Right.
There must have been a big you have to tell how many people not to spit.
Yeah, fortunately we don't have to tell them that. These days. That's really interesting, sort of, particularly in the context of what we've just been through, that this is something that humans have had to endure many times over and not so far in the past. And they deal with it very similarly.
Yeah, for sure. Albert ended up moving up. He moved up here soon after Bertie passed away, so it was maybe a way of dealing with grief. Albert, and
trying to be closer to.
They were devastated.
Yeah, of course.
And 2 rooms in the far end were never completed. We use it for storage. So when Bertie wasn't going to come home, they just
said, "Forget it. We're not doing
stopped.
anymore."
Yeah,
understandable.
Yeah.
So you don't have any ghost stories for us, Karen?
Not really. No, some of our sister sites have some really good stories, but I have a colleague that's convinced maybe Margaret Constance is up here because her room was there, but I wish I did. I wish I had this really spooky story, but
that's
I
okay
don't.
though.
At other sites they do, but here it's kind of.
Well, it was a happy family home, and
it
so
seemed to be.
Yeah,
their struggles, whether losing Bertie so young, and then Percy with PTSD, and that wasn't that wasn't understood. Yeah, so you can have all the money in the world, but it doesn't save you from living life and all the hard things that go with it. Yeah, absolutely. Which is a good lesson, I think, for people to remember. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Sure.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. It has been eye-opening, inspiring, educational. This has been a really, really neat experience.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, I love talking about history, so
there you go. Well, maybe we'll talk with you again.
Then do come,
All right. Well, look for Karen when you come for your tour at Spadina Museum. Thanks a lot. And I think we'll probably go outside and wander around.
Please do.
Thank you.
Right.
What a fabulous and absolutely incredibly informative tour we just had with Karen.
It was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, thank goodness Karen was there. There was so much information and it was an extensive tour. Definitely something people should put on their list of places to go in the city of Toronto.
And after the tour, we had a little bit of an opportunity to wander around outside in the orchard and the flower garden.
At the original greenhouse you can find on the grounds, in addition to the garage and the quarters where the chauffeur lived above, and also the gardener's quarters.
Yeah.
So make sure you take a peek at that as well.
Yeah, it's 6 acres that
6
you
acres.
can
Incredible.
wander around.
In the heart of the city.
In the heart of the city. You don't even feel like you're in the city at all, do you?
You don't.
No. And now,
Our detour.
we're right next door at Casa Loma.
Casa Loma.
Yeah.
It's just steps from Spadina House.
Yeah, it is.
So we didn't have to go far for this detour today.
We did not. Right next door. And Casa Loma is actually an enormous castle. For people who are not familiar with it, it is a Gothic Revival castle style mansion that was built between 1911 and 1914 by Sir Henry Pellatt, who was a financier back in the turn of the century. But Casa Loma was part of his undoing. He spent too much, played a little bit of a shell game, as Karen said, and lost his fortune, sadly. So nobody really lived in Casa Loma for too long, and it's had all kinds of incarnations. One of the saddest moments in time was when it was pretty much abandoned, and vandals had their way with it for a little bit, but it's been fully restored, is now owned by a private entertainment group.
Now it's an event venue, right?
Yeah, it's an event venue. They have all kinds of things going on there. They have a steakhouse. They have outdoor concerts in the absolutely spectacular gardens. They have beautiful teas, like high teas in the conservatory. And you can just tour it. And one of the best events there, though, Walker, that I really love and my kids really love,
Which was?
is like the haunted Casa Loma experience that you can have.
Right.
And it is fully immersive. There are live actors jump scaring you all over the place, and it's wild.
And they have the Christmas Light Festival, the Holiday Light Festival as well, correct?
Yeah. So there's a lot going on there. One of the most amazing things is that it has a tunnel, like a still operational tunnel that goes from the actual castle itself to the original stables.
Can you go in the tunnel?
You can go in the tunnel.
Oh, I
yeah,
love that.
It's very cool. The kids love it. And the stables themselves are beautiful. So
even if you don't go on a tour and you just want to appreciate the exterior architecture in the grounds, that's possible as well. And you can grab an ice cream and just sit outside by the fountain.
yeah, just enjoy your time at the rise of the hill, looking over the Toronto skyline. So it's been really fun today, Walker.
It was a fun day.
Yeah, thanks for coming out with me.
Thanks for driving.
Thank you for joining us at Home and Abroad with your host, Harrison Walker. If you enjoyed this episode, we would really appreciate it if you would rate and review our show. It helps us grow and expand our reach. Subscribe to follow us each week as we continue the conversation. You can also say hi to us on Instagram at Harrison Walker. We would love to hear from you.